Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Scrutiny Education Performance panel. Have we got any apologies?
We've had no apologies today.
I can tell you, Steve Gallagher, Councillor Steve Gallagher, is going to be late. Some sort of issue came up and he's had to deal with that, so he will be with us, but he will be late. So, are there any disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests? No. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Obviously, the prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. And the next item, we're whizzing through at this rate. We'll be finished now by 4:15. Yeah, chance to be a fine thing. But minutes first of all, and letters. But minutes first of all. You've all had a copy of the minutes. Could I get a proposal that they're a true record?
I'm quite happy to propose them.
Thank you, Bev. Seconder?
Yeah, go ahead. No problem.
Great. There we are, Councillor Mike Day. So there we are. Great. Thank you very much. Then on the letters that we had and replies, any excuse me, any comments? Okay, great, thanks. Only thing I might say that's really to Councillor Robert Smith and possibly to Helen. There was an article last night in the Evening Post about a report that Estyn had done on harassment by pupils and their peers, actually, which I'm sure is something you will take on board.
Yeah,
Robert. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
come in there, Chair. You know, I saw the same article, and there's items on the BBC about it as well. You know, this is a piece of work by Estyn, and if those headlines are correct, then you know it's a very concerning situation. But I think we need to engage with the actual Estyn report itself and see what the implications are. You know, we've looked at things as a local authority here in Swansea, but you know they give a wider picture across the whole of Wales, and that they may well be recommendations that we need to take on board.
Great, thank you. It did say that they'd looked at at least one school, a secondary school, in every authority, so that would have been in Swansea as well. And obviously, we're all concerned about that. We share those concerns, and. But the level
of reporting, the number of pupils, the percentage of pupils that are reporting incidents, that's a huge concern.
Yeah, and a lot of them.
Let's engage with the report itself.
Great, thank you very much, and that would best we can discuss it at some future time. But certainly, I know that's a concern with us all. Thank you very much.
And Chair, can I come in there?
Certainly, sorry. Yes,
you.
Of course.
Yeah, just to say, obviously, we've looked at the 3 recommendations within the Estyn report for local authorities. The first recommendation is to analyse data in relation to bullying and harassment carefully. We do analyse some data, but there's more work that we can do there. The second recommendation is to ensure that we've got support around gender issues in particular, because the report highlighted homophobic harassment of boys in particular. So we need to ensure that we've got both intervention and support on gender issues. And the third recommendation for local authorities is to provide school staff with professional learning so that their approach is as proactive as possible. In Swansea, we've got a strong foundation, as I said before, in Scrutiny, and we need to build on that foundation of professional learning around such matters through our safeguarding officer, but also through our curriculum, and specifically the curriculum in respect of relationships within between peers in schools. So we have already looked at the 3 recommendations, and we propose to take forward those recommendations through a working party in the new year.
Great, thank you. That's pretty proactive. Thank you very much indeed.
We'll be able to respond back to the committee once we're further ahead.
Great, thank you. But obviously you need to do that background. But great, thanks. And but it is something that concerns everybody. Thank you. Are there any public questions?
There are no public questions today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And the next item is a verbal update on the school meals issue. Councillor Robert Smith.
Yes, if we could just open this and then perhaps Helen can come in. We've looked at, the leader has requested that members identify any issues so that and report them to ourselves as an education directorate so that any issues can be looked into. We are very clear in Swansea that no child in a Swansea school should go hungry, and there are contingencies that school cooks are been told to put in place if any issues do arise. It's a complex issue, but we're not aware, or at least we weren't when we discussed this, of any issues where children had been refused food in Swansea schools. And that's despite we've looked at this because we were aware of issues that have been raised before. And perhaps Helen, if you want to come in with the details on this.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. So we have obviously a policy. There's a tolerance in terms of 5 debits that are allowed, and obviously we send messages then to remind parents. Now, the difficulty we have sometimes is that not all parents remember to pay. That's one issue. We also have parents that potentially can't pay at a particular time, and we would encourage confidential conversations between those parents and leaders in our schools at all times if there's a difficulty, to give some greater tolerance around the issue. We are aware of one case, and that's the only case to date that we've received where there was potentially a misunderstanding between the father and the mother of who should be paying. And I think one parent was receiving alerts indicating that there was a need to pay, and maybe it was a communication issue within one family. But indeed, we've received nothing from ward members or parents into the department indicating that they've got concerns. What we have put in place is a procedure where all our cooks are aware if a child, it's no fault of theirs, if they've turned up in school and their parent or carer, one or the other, hasn't paid for whatever reasons, wouldn't or forgot, then we would ensure that that child receives food, at least a sandwich and a drink. So our cooks are really alert to this issue. It's not the child's fault, and as Councillor Smith said, we would never allow a child to go hungry, but obviously we do have a policy that we try to stick to.
Great, thanks. Are there any other comments or anything people would like to comment on that? Great, thank you very much for.
The only thing I'd add, or support what Helena said. We are here to support families, and if families are struggling for whatever reason, they need to be discussing this with schools, and there are confidential help that can be provided. And if any members become aware of the situation, let us know whether it's through the education email or myself as a cabinet member, and we will look into this, because this is not what should be happening in our schools.
Great, thank you for that assurance. Councillor Smith, Anderson, Councillor Smith, Cyril Anderson.
Yeah,
you're right.
I take on board what cabinet member and Helen is saying. Just with these cold months, Helen, you say a sandwich and a drink, but would that mean a hot meal as well? If it is cold, something to warm them up.
Well, for free school meals pupils, obviously they would receive hot meals, and those who should be paying for their meals would always receive hot meals. But if there's a contingency and a kind of emergency situation, there may not be enough prepared hot food around. So obviously those scenarios arise at short notice, and there could be, depending on the size of the school and the catering kind of function, it could be that just a sandwich is available. But obviously, if there's enough food to go around, yes, the ones, who haven't paid but should have paid will also receive it. But there's always enough food for free school meals pupils, be it hot or cold. Does that
Thanks,
answer your
Helen.
question?
Yes, that answers my question. I'm happy with that response.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comment by anybody? Okay, thank you very much. So we are moving on. Great. The next item is the performance against identified education priorities. Robert, I think you were leading on this.
Yes, I'll introduce the item and then I'll hand over to Helen for the
Great, thank you.
for the details on this. I think overall we have a positive set of outcomes to report this year again. Looking at it, it's obviously been complicated by the pandemic and the unprecedented events that have befallen us in 2020-21, and that has to be taken into consideration when we're measuring the concrete achievements that have been made by our schools and by ourselves as a council during that period. I'll hand over to Helen. I mean, obviously the other thing that's worth mentioning as well is that we're not able to use certain of the data that used to be collected by Welsh Government. You know, that data were giving us KPIs, key performance indicators that we could work to, that were standard, and we knew where we were. The absence of those means that measuring performance is that much more difficult. I think that needs to be borne in mind as well. So it has to be put in the context of the KPIs, and it has to be put in the context of the unprecedented challenges that we've had during the year that's being discussed. But Helen has got the details at her fingertips, and she could be able to talk us through the report, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Helen.
Yeah, so as Councillor Smith indicated, the normal KPIs, the key performance indicators, are absent, alongside the fact that we have no categorisation in Wales. That's been suspended as well. So we don't have the normal measures that we would scrutinise as part of this panel. And also, as you know, Estyn inspections have been suspended. So a lot of things that we can benchmark ourselves against are absent. However, it's important that panelists today understand that there are key priorities that we're still working on, not just part of our corporate objectives for education and skills, but drilling down further to our directorate priorities. And there are 7 key priorities, but if you add COVID, it's become an 8th priority during the last 3 academic years, really. So in terms of the report itself, obviously we've indicated our progress against the objectives within our priorities. We've done that on 2 levels. One, the directorate priorities, and then the team objectives as well. So in education, we have currently 9 business units, and those 9 business units also provide kind of strength and impetus into the directorate priorities. So if I just touch upon page 18, I think, in your pack, the first appendix, Appendix A, it takes us through the key priorities. And as you can see, we've been working on the capital programme for schools, for improving our schools, and indeed Scrutiny has heard really about the progress of 21st century schools across Swansea. And the traction in delivering that programme is strong despite COVID, and we know that we've delivered at least 80% of that programme in terms of Band B to date. But alongside that, we're also considering how we organise our specialist places in Swansea. So we have 4 key projects that we've been working on, not just during the course of last academic year. And I must stress that this reporting period that we're talking about here this evening covers the last academic year. So it's not quite in line with the corporate quarterly performance reporting cycle. This is more to do with an academic year. So looking back at last academic year, we had significant improvement in how we are trying to plan sufficient specialist places for our most vulnerable children in Swansea. And that's very much part of our strategy for additional learning needs in Swansea, trying to find the right places. It's an intricate piece of work, but we've managed during the course of the last academic year to actually create 45 additional needs places in Pen y Bryn Special School, and also on a satellite site in the old Arfryn site, which was part of the PRU portfolio, but is now actually being used by Pen y Bryn School as well. So by creating better facilities for additional learning needs children in Swansea, we're able to ensure that we place them closer to home, so that we don't have out of county kind of travel, and we ensure that those places really are very much aligned with the mainstream provision in Swansea. We're also starting to explore how our specialist teaching facilities across Swansea look. So we know we have 30 schools with specialist teaching facilities, and we are trying to work and co-construct with our school leaders how best to redesign where they're placed and how they look across Swansea. So that piece of work is maturing in terms of taking a proposal forward next year, but the groundwork to do that has definitely accelerated during the last academic year. So obviously looking back at last academic year as well, the handover of the PRU was a key significant success for us in meeting our objectives. And also we've been able to look at funding pressures and set budget proposals last year, which you heard about in Scrutiny in February. And also that budget setting proposal is actually reached maturity for the next financial year as well. So all of that work, we've obviously made progress. Obviously some of the progress we would have liked to make has been impinged by the COVID issues, and we've evaluated our progress quite honestly, and obviously in education for some reason we've got a red, amber, yellow and green status for progress, and we've evaluated that as amber. So I won't go through each of the priorities, but just to give you a flavour of some of the key successes and the realistic evaluation of our progress. So the second priority is quite significant. It is developing our additional learning needs strategy, which straddles more than one academic year. But we are looking at 6 priorities there, and we've increased our involvement with stakeholders, particularly Swansea's Parent Carer Forum. We've moved forward in terms of workforce development and ensuring that our practitioners, our additional learning needs coordinators in our schools are absolutely knowledgeable about the new changes in terms of ALN. We've also ensured that there's visibility on our ALN strategy across Swansea, not just from an education perspective, but also working with other departments across the council to ensure that ALN really becomes everybody's business. So that piece of work through the Additional Learning Needs Board is gathering momentum, but again we've been quite honest in our evaluation, and we've re-graded it as an amber in terms of progress. There's a lot of work to be done, and some of it was slowed down because of disrupted periods to education. So we weren't able to maybe train as much as quickly as we'd have liked to, but certainly we've picked up the pace, and schools have been back from April onwards in the last academic year. Priority 3 for us was developing schools as learning organisations. What does that really mean in reality? Well, it means that we've got both leaders and practitioners in our schools that want to learn professionally, continue to look at evidence-based practice. They're willing to share their practice, open their doors and windows really to make sure that they're continuing to provide the best education possible. So we've obviously worked during restricted periods and disrupted periods, but we are still ensuring that our practitioners and leaders in Swansea gain knowledge and understanding really, and that they share it. So you can see some of the activities and successes there. So there was good progress in meeting those objectives. The 4th priority was looking at developing partnerships through our leaders. and developing greater networks, tighter networks, not just for the sake of creating networks, but networks that were purposeful and aligned to key areas of change, such as the curriculum reform agenda. So we've tried to make sure that our leadership development is still a priority for us in terms of school improvement, because we believe that building leadership capacity will serve us well really in the future. So we've worked not just in training our head teachers and creating networks and partnerships around key purposeful kind of themes. We've also trained our governors in Swansea as well on key matters. So we've rated that as yellow. The fifth priority has been to focus on our positive behaviour strategy. Now, we've rated this as amber because we can see during the course of the last academic year, we didn't have children in school to be able to implement the behaviour policy and strategy as well as we'd like. So obviously, when the children are there, it's easier to implement a strategy because it's about them, it's about the positive behaviour of our pupils. But in today's newsletter, we've again reminded our schools what the strategy is and what the purpose of that positive behaviour policy is as well, to make sure that our children are engaged and are ready to learn as much as possible. So if we move on to the the sixth priority, which is of course a key priority in education, is getting the curriculum right in Swansea. So we have obviously worked again with our schools to make sure that readiness and implementation according to our implementation plan is delivering as much as it can given the constraints of COVID. So obviously we've heard that some activity was paused because of COVID, but certainly we've provided a lot of support and development for the curriculum in Swansea. Then we'll go to the penultimate one, which is safety and safeguarding. And it's not just about keeping our schools in kind of COVID safe environments. It's about safeguarding of pupils and child protection of pupils as well. So we've, made sure that we are looking at the most vulnerable in Swansea, making sure that they're protected and ensuring well-being of the ones that are at risk of harm as well. And we've done that despite of COVID. So we've rated that as a yellow in terms of meeting the set objectives we had. And the final one then is how we've dealt with COVID. And this has been a key piece of work where many officers across the Directorate have had to obviously repurpose. You've heard us talk a lot about our response to COVID, but indeed it's become quite a difficult thing during the 3 academic years. I can't tell you it's easier this academic year than it was at the start. In fact, this term has probably been the most difficult for our schools and managing expectations. So we've tried to be as supportive and helpful, provide additional guidance to our schools, and we consider that to be yellow in terms of our position. And then just to touch upon finally, as I said earlier, Appendix B gives you a flavour. I haven't given you what sits below this because as I would describe the Directorate priorities or the department priorities, you can see that that just gives you the headlines. We've probably got thousands of pages of strategy that sit below that. And then in Appendix B, we've also got plans to support these objectives across our 9 teams. And these objectives as well just give you a flavour of the type of impact you can see. So most of them are pretty healthy in terms of achieving the objectives in the round, but you will see that some of them haven't gained as much traction, and the steps we've taken to meet those objectives have been hampered, usually because of COVID, staffing issues, or external pressures. But I would say that COVID has presented us with some difficulties. And I'm looking at the music service, for example. We've got a team there in terms of Swansea Music Service, but a lot of it is rated as amber because COVID has had an impact really, and also the take-up of the music service in Swansea is not strong. it's run by an SLA, a service level agreement, and the buyback rate from our schools currently is teetering around the 40% mark. So that service has not been able to develop as much as it would like, because it's trying to overcome the difficulties of COVID and trying to maintain as many schools in terms of that SLA. So that just gives you a flavour, and I'm really happy to listen to what you have to say and to answer your questions around this report, and just interested to hear your remarks.
If I could just come in, Chair, and
Certainly, yes.
support what Helen has said, because as I said earlier, it's been an unprecedented year, but we can point to schools that have been built. We can point to the work around the ALN agenda, which I think the amount of work that's being done there is phenomenal, to be honest, and I think it's a tribute to the staff in terms of the way they are ensuring that we respond appropriately to the new act. And there are things there that are always be ongoing. Schools and learning organisations, strengthening school leadership, and making sure that we have the right curriculum in place. That's not a task and finish exercise. Those are things that are going to be going on continuously in our schools. And I think as well, things like behaviour strategy and safeguarding issues. Those again are never task and finish. They're ongoing. They're evolving situations, and we know that COVID has created its own challenges in those particular areas, and we as an authority are responding to that. Our schools are responding very clearly to those needs, and it's a matter of making sure that we continue to support them moving forward in doing so. So I think what Helen's presentation has given you is a warts and all overview of the directorate, and I think it gives an accurate picture of where we are.
Great, thank you very much. We've got a couple of hands up. First Mike and then Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. That's really interesting. And I suppose the questions that I'd have would be more of a generic nature rather than specific at the moment. So if I could focus on those first of all, and it's to do with the way in which the conclusions have been reached. The first is that it's useful to have Appendix C there to indicate what all the different categories mean. But I guess that some of the measures might be qualitative as much as quantitative. And if I could take one example in the overall, the priorities number 8, for example, looking at something like return to school after Easter has been well managed. How is that how is that measured? The second question related to that then is that who actually comes up with the assessment of the category? It's easy when you've got quantitative ones where you can just kind of say, well, yes, we've reached that, and as Robert said, being able to point to schools which are built is fantastic, and that's a physical thing that you can point to. But I just wonder how the whole process of coming to the decision as to whether something is amber, yellow, green, whatever, is reached. And the other question then related to this is that I accept that this is all to do with kind of the department priorities this year. And I suppose I was just a little bit kind of questioning how much of that is outward looking. It's very much inward looking at the moment, isn't it, in relation to the performance within the schools and the education department. And a lot of this, though, does depend upon working with other partners. For example, with you talked about the Swansea music team. There may be others available to support that. How much engagement is there with University of Wales, Trinity St David's, or Swansea University in connection with some of the areas of work that they provide? And I suppose I suppose I'm just asking for confirmation that what we're looking at is a very narrow at the moment list of priorities which don't encompass all of the work of the education department in terms of doing what we're supposed to be doing, and that is making sure that our pupils get the best possible opportunity and chances in life. I did have just one specific one, which was related to your comment about Appendix B being supported by thousands of pages of documents underneath, and just to kind of a worry that, you know, whether we're focusing too much on measuring things rather than doing things. I'm sure that's not the case, but you're just trying to get that balance right, isn't it? It's you know, making sure that we're spending time doing what's important, and that is, as I said, making sure that our youngsters have best access to opportunities in life as possible.
Great, thank you, Mike. Helen, do you want to respond to that? And then Linda is the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'll try and respond to how we determine really what kind of status, what kind of RAG or RAG status we have. It's not done in isolation. That's the first thing I'd like to say. So it's not one person determining it. We have an opportunity really as a team and as a group of senior leaders to constantly sit down to challenge each other, and that kind of RAG or RAG status is understood by everybody, and it's not a team leader or a head of service determining this. We have conversations, we evaluate together, and obviously there is qualitative information there and sometimes lack of quantitative information that would back it up. But you know, in terms of tangible outcomes, that really helps us with our RAG rating. The intangibles are the softer information, the anecdotal information. And as you gave an example there, you spoke about how do we know if we manage something well? And I guess we know because we don't receive complaints. So that's one indicator for us. We also know through feedback, and we get a lot of feedback from our schools. It's constant. And I think because during COVID, our communication with schools actually increased, that allowed us to receive greater feedback on a more frequent basis. So that approach really to understanding how well we're doing is not just internal to the directorate, it's become a little bit more outward facing in terms of receiving more feedback. We haven't actually surveyed our head teachers and our performance, and that's something potentially that we should be considering doing. We have conducted other surveys. For example, there was an objective there talking about teaching and learning during COVID, during the last academic year, and we've surveyed some of our schools in terms of their response as to support needs. So I don't know if I can give you assurance that it's not done in isolation. It's not something we put a finger in the wind and decide that, oh yes, we've done this. But certainly our managers, our business unit managers understand really when they come to present their objectives and when they come to present their progress, they talk about not just their successes, they talk about their challenges and they talk about the future as well. And they also talk...
Sorry, Helen, could I just ask on that then, does any benchmarking with external organisations or, you know, against performance of other local authorities, does that feature in this assessment as well?
If there is comparable data available, yes, we will. So, for example, some of the performance indicators that are reported as part of corporate performance monitoring, you know, the attendance, for example, I know it's back on the corporate performance monitoring, that's there. So we are able to make comparisons. So we know, for example, with attendance now, we know the schools are expected to be back, so we can make comparisons with other authorities there. We know where we rank as of last week with attendance, that kind of thing. So where it's sensible to make a comparison, we will. Obviously, some of our strategic plans are unique to Swansea. It's very difficult then to compare the level of planning and delivery against that plan, because, for example, our additional learning plan, additional learning needs plan in Swansea would look different to another authority. It's quite bespoke and unique to the needs of Swansea. So we have to evaluate progress against our own objectives, and sometimes there is no comparable benchmark. What I would say is that as a group of managers and heads of service in education, there is constant evaluation of what we do against our strategic plans, really. So it's quite tight in terms of keeping that on the front burner. You spoke then, Mike, about partnerships and being more outward facing. Well, as part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, I think the ways of working now have been transformed, haven't they? We've had this act in place since 2015. So it's an expectation that everybody works in partnership, demonstrates integrated ways of working. So maybe this report doesn't show how much work we do with other departments within this council, but also we work with other authorities. We work with other authorities in terms of ALN. It's not explicit in this document this evening, but in terms of ALN, we have a group looking at transformation of ALN in the old Eru footprint, so the South West and Mid Wales footprint. They also look at additional learning needs. So we have a constant dialogue there, talking to our partners really about their plans and learning from them as well. In terms of things like Band B, obviously that Band B programme, the projects within it are unique to Swansea. So it's very difficult for us to compare, but certainly we would work with other local authorities as part of fora nationally as well. So there'll be an opportunity to meet. I'm thinking of a strategic plan in terms of developing a WESP, for example. Again, we'd work with other local authorities, compare, so that we're not working in isolation. So it's very much part of how we work at the moment in education. You spoke about music there specifically in relation to partnership. And again, there are ample opportunities working with a range of music providers and education providers. And I know our music manager does her utmost really to engage with a range of other stakeholders, other organisations. So I'm hoping that is continuing really to find solutions to better manage and deliver music in Swansea. And then I think you spoke about the thousands of documents and plans and bits of paper, the thousands of pages that sit underneath this planning. And I think in some instances that planning is really important, otherwise we won't deliver well enough. We can have aspirations, but without clear planning, those aspirations could fall on the ground. So when you look at the corporate objectives for education and skills, there are 9 of them currently. I think that might reduce a little bit next cycle. But when you look at the steps we take to meet those objectives, they have to be underpinned by clear and precise planning so that we do enjoy success in Swansea. But you're right, Mike, there is a balance to be struck in terms of getting too embroiled in paperwork and keeping our heads too low and close to the desk when we should be looking on the horizon really and seeing what else is out there and taking the temperature really of how well we're doing by talking to other people and not just focusing on ourselves. So I'm hoping that covers.
I'd echo that, because the phrase that comes to mind, you value what you measure and you measure what you value. And what we don't want is a range of micro level targets that are being pursued and assessed for the sake of it, and it becomes a tick box exercise. We've got to take that step back and say, well, what do all these targets lead to? What is the big picture here, and what are the crucial outcomes that we should be working to? And that to be honest with you, that we don't hide behind targets that have been hit and saying, well, that's it, there's no problem. No, we've got to look at the, as I said, the bigger picture and make sure that the system delivers what it's been designed to do.
Thank you very much, Linda. And can I say you're looking very seasonal tonight? You're on mute. You're on mute, Linda. Oh, there we are.
I've got one question really and one comment. I think it was right at the beginning that you said that more children are needing the additional learning needs. Is that what you said? And therefore, why is that? Why are there more children in Swansea that are needing it? Is something going wrong, or is it just population explosion? So that's my question. And the other thing is that I know this is a little bit off track in a way, but I was so concerned about that child, Arthur. I couldn't sleep. I just had 4 awful days as I wrote to David Hawes, and he's on leave. And I just wanted to, first of all, I initiated a conversation with Mayo School, asking them, you know, I know how good they are, but just making sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. I know that you can never be sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. But I wrote to David Hawes, and he's on leave, but Julie Davis, head of Child and Family Services, has written back to me a long letter, but it was very good of her, and I felt reassured. But one of the points that she has said in this long email was, we delivered 10 multi-agency workshops in November in our early help hub building to discuss and share our continuum of need indicators, the support document called the threshold document. And she said also, that wasn't the bit I wanted to read out, it might be helpful to share some recent positive developments in Swansea Child and Family Services to further strengthen the way we work together to safeguard children. And I think because the school, when I initiated this conversation with the school, they said that they wanted to be part of, you know, they wanted to go across all departments in looking at children's needs. And she said that the workshops were attended by schools designating safeguarding leads and well-being for pastoral workers and ALNCO's health visitors. Now, you probably realise I have no idea what I'm talking about, but the point is, I thought it was important to ask the questions and just initiate conversations and highlight things. And I know that Mayo School is going to look at this again, because apparently there is one family in the school. I know nothing about it, it's confidential. There is one family that Leon is looking at and just checking up on. So I feel it's important for all of us just to raise the questions, and that is what I think is important with everything we do. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Helen, over to you.
Thank you, Linda. And yes, very important questions to ask, Linda. I'll start with the first one in terms of additional learning needs. Obviously, we know in the last 7 years in Swansea, autistic spectrum disorder pupils, that's increased threefold in Swansea. So we know that there is a particular demand really for specialist places in Swansea. We also know that generally speaking, a lot of our learners who have additional learning needs attend specialist schools outside of Swansea. We would dearly like to educate them in Swansea. So by creating more places, we are bringing them back from out of county places into Swansea. So that is a key objective for us in terms of making sure we've got enough places for the learners who belong in Swansea, and to bring them closer to home for their own well-being. So that's one aspiration, and I'm glad you've touched really on the second subject in terms of child protection and safeguarding. It's very much close to our heart, and the one thing that kept myself awake at night during lockdown, during the pandemic, was the thought that some young children who are at risk of harm anyway would become more kind of at risk of further harm during lockdown. So we are working, as you said, Linda, you outlined there workshops around the continuum of need. So our schools, working with colleagues in child and family services, have indeed undertaken workshops recently to make sure that there's a better understanding of families themselves, their needs, and also thresholds in terms of reporting. But it's a key area that we would wish to continue to work with Child and Family Services. I met with Julie Davis, as you mentioned her, this week. We have a joint meeting, quite a regular basis education meeting with colleagues in Child and Family Services. And our key concern really is that we don't exclude pupils in Swansea. It's a key worry for us, especially permanent exclusions, because it it has no good outcome. So that could be a worry for safeguarding as well. And also attendance, because we have lower than normal attendance during this time of year. Obviously because of COVID, but we seem to have a tail of people not attending schools. We're worried really that that non-attendance can lead to children not being seen, and then their well-being checks maybe not being in place because schools are now expected to be back on site. But we do have an increased number of families who are not sending their children back to school, and it's not quite always related to actually being ill with COVID. It's something else. It could be anxiety about returning, but we've seen a drop off, and we can correlate that attendance to certain schools where it's even below the level we'd expect. So we are targeting our resources. We're using the education welfare officers we have in education to make sure they're talking as well with colleagues in child and family. We're trying to understand really where the big issues are. And obviously it's a huge concern to us that we've got children who are not seen in school and who are not, potentially who may not be getting the welfare checks that we had in lockdown. And obviously in the case of Arthur, this little boy, that welfare check from the school's perspective was not enough. That was probably clear, but we'll have to have a national inquiry to see what the outcomes are in reality. So it is a worry for us, the attendance, and we are discussing that with our colleagues in Child and Family Services.
Can I ask one more?
If I just echo what Helen has said, Chair, there are some key issues here, about monitoring and us knowing who these children are, that they're ensuring they're on our radar, making sure that information is shared between children's services, between schools and so on, that all the relevant agencies are involved. During lockdown, and Helen will testify to this, I was concerned. Yes, there's a group of young people that are receiving particular attention from ourselves, but I was also interested in the level below that, the second tier, and making sure that they remained on the radar, and that we didn't lose sight of those groups of families where issues could escalate unless the support was there. And I think that was a big issue during lockdown, and I think it is something that we're still working on now.
Great, thank you. Linda, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, can I just ask one? I was listening intently to, is it Lord Lamming was talking about his report that he had done 20 years ago, and he was saying how important it is to see children playing with other children, and also if the parents are present, to how they react when they run back to their parents. And he was saying that was a good indicator to see how and I was just wondering if he was also saying that the trouble is the plans are there, but sometimes the money isn't there to go with it. I was just thinking, are these the sort of workshops where you can observe children and see how they're reacting with the parents? Because he was saying how clever some parents are at masking what's going on, and that you have to be focused on the child. I was really sort of fascinated by all this. So I just wanted to say that I've been doing some research on this, and I hope that everybody is sort of geared up for it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Helen, do you want to come back? And then I know Sue wants to come in.
Yeah, a key part of our armoury to protect children is child protection safeguarding training in schools. So the training that our teachers and teaching assistants receive is key in terms of their alertness, their observations of children. So part of our general training for our foundation phase teachers, as an example, is about observation, observing their development in class as part of assessment. So I would hope that the training we provide, both from a child protection and safeguarding perspective, and general training for younger children who are not always able to speak for themselves, that both of those things together allow us to have eyes on children and observe them very carefully, and those teachers then know where to take their concerns and share with the designated child protection officers in their school.
Thank you. I feel better for that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Helen, for that detailed response. Thank you. Sue.
Just really a clarification. I again felt for that little child, Arthur. It was horrendous. And just clarification that the health authority are part of your communication between schools, social services and his health in there.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Excuse me. Are there any other questions?
Do you want me to answer? Do you want me to try and answer that question?
Yeah, sure.
Chair?
Yes. Go. Yeah. Yeah. If you
Yeah,
can.
just to give Councillor Jones some assurance, obviously the work we've been doing around continuum of need obviously does involve health visitors as well. So that is part of looking at thresholds, looking at signs of safety, that kind of thing. So that's, you know, from a health perspective, that's where we get the input from health visitors, and obviously that covers the early years, and obviously then the involvement of health around other issues, potentially from neglect and other types of abuse. Obviously, we have those services around mental health services for young people, for the older people, for the younger people, not just our youngest pupils as well, in terms of mental health and dealing with issues that have arisen as a result of abuse. And of course, the other thing as well we do in education is we have a direct link between South Wales Police and schools. We act as the conduit in education. We implement the operation Encompass. So that means that any child who's observed domestic abuse or heard it in the family, we have an alert from the police and we communicate to a key member of staff in the school, so that child's well-being then is catered for the day after, immediately after witnessing or hearing abuse in the home.
And you know, the key here is sharing information. The practitioners know who to share information with, they're confident in sharing that information, and that they know that appropriate action will be taken when they pass the information on. And as Helen said, you know, we need to involve social services, the health service, the police, schools. We all need to be working. It is the old phrase, everybody's business.
Thank you both. I just wanted clarification. I knew it was happening, but just wanted you to say thank you.
Great, thank you, Sue. Right, any other questions on that issue? Great, thank you very much, Helen and Robert. The next item is the Swansea Skills Partnership update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Should I go first, Robert? Okay, so I think it was this time last year when you met members of the Swansea Skills Partnership. They came to the scrutiny meeting a year ago, and we heard about the positive kind of traction in terms of the ambition that the Policy Development Committee had back in 2008 to develop a local skills partnership where educators came together. And I think your words, Chair, was that a year ago were that you were proud of what had been achieved as part of Swansea Skills Partnership, and that partnership has continued to flourish and to build on its success. And obviously the report gives you a summary really of key activities undertaken since that meeting and scrutiny a year ago. Obviously the skills coordinator we have is employed on a permanent basis, and that key role has helped to galvanise much of the work in this area. And you've heard that we had key strands that we were looking at. Indeed, we've got 5 key strands that the Swansea Skills Partnership has built on. And one of the key developments since we met in scrutiny last year is the NEETs Prevention Partnership. So not in education, employment or training. That partnership has gained traction during the last academic year. And we are looking on strategic themes around the performance in terms of NEETs. We're looking at the provision to prevent NEETs in the first place. We're looking at access to activities that would help prevent NEETs, and we're also looking at the well-being of youngsters and how that can impact on their engagement. So that particular part of Swansea Skills Partnership has really blossomed during the last year. And again, we've got a range of partners working with each other, Careers Wales being a key partner, employment, training partners around that particular subgroup of the Swansea Skills Partnership. We've also got, through the partnership, we've been able to maintain our learning city status, and there will be a kind of review of that actually next week to make sure that we are maintaining that status as a learning city. And because the evidence around the table in Swansea Skills Partnership has been so strong, that's been used really to provide that kind of continuity of that status. So that's helpful. One of the things that's happened since we last spoke to you about this partnership is that the Skills and Talent Initiative that has now been approved. It was probably the final project of the City Deal projects. It's one of 9 projects, one of the final ones to be approved by Welsh and UK government. And that project really will allow us, it's a £30 million project in its totality. It will allow us really to be part, as with the other 3 authorities, Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire, ourselves and Neath Talbot, we'll be able to access projects potentially that will support our schools and other educators around the issue of apprenticeships and training. So the report, I think, speaks for itself. It gives you, it provides a useful summary at the end of the report, really, into what's been achieved. And I hope you agree that it's continued with the success you saw last year.
Thank you, Helen. I'll come in afterwards, but yes, indeed, is the answer to that. Mike, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, if I can say that it is pleasing to see the actions have been taken, and personally, I'm delighted at the emphasis that there is on NEETs, something that I set up and wanted to make sure that we focused on, when I was cabinet member. So glad to see that it's in safe hands, Robert, with progressing this particular area, because it's not just the fact that the young people are not engaged; it's the implication of them not being engaged in terms of other things that happen as a result. So, personally, I'm delighted at that. I suppose in a sense I'm going against what I might have said earlier on, but is there a RAG type system that's applied to the Swansea Skills Partnership in the sense of looking at where progress might have been achieved and what the areas for further development might be? I'm not necessarily suggesting that that you develop one, but if there is one, would it be possible for us as a panel to have access to that or sight of it? It just gives us an indication of, whilst there are things that have been achieved, what might else have been achieved, and what needs to be achieved in future. And I think specifically related to that as well is the views of the partners in terms of how they feel about the way in which the partnership is going, whether there's any information that we can have access to in that. So I think those would be the kind of the key things. I think if I've read it correctly, there's a little bit of, if I can interpret it, disappointment about the lack of engagement by the business community. And I just wondered whether there's anything that we can do as a panel in terms of recommending further actions to develop that. I appreciate that it is difficult identifying a single point of contact, but I wondered whether it then articulates with the council's economic development and economic regeneration strategy, and whether there is somebody from within one of those groups who might well be able to represent the needs of businesses within the area.
Great. Helen, do you want to respond to that? And
yeah, if Helen goes first, and I'll come in afterwards if I can.
Yeah, on the issue of RAG rating the work of the partnership, that's something we can consider in combination with the partners. Obviously, we've got work streams and work plans that go with our 5 kind of priorities. So, building digital digital capacity, we've got a work plan there with key work streams in that plan. And that plan then is shared with the partnership board. The difficulty there, Mike, is that the person who's been delivering on that plan has got a job elsewhere with one of the partners in the skills partnership. So we have recruited and we'll be able to fill that gap in after Easter next year. So it would be difficult really to evaluate all our work because we've got some key people who are missing now in terms of education. That said, obviously partners themselves need to tell us really what they would like to continue to work on. At the moment, it's the impetus is largely coming from the directorate itself rather than the partners. And in any true partnership, you would expect the partners to be equal partners and to be able to provide some impetus around the common ground that they would wish to work for themselves. So I'm waiting for that recalibration to happen. So I'm thinking for the future for that partnership, we would need to understand each partner's contribution to the city deal as one example, and how they feed into the skills shortage agenda. That's one thing I'm keen to do. So it'd be interesting to hear what partners have to say. We haven't evaluated it as such. We haven't surveyed our partners. Obviously, you heard from partners last year about their views of the partnership, but we haven't done so in the last kind of year to gauge their opinions. But what I would say, it's a very much an open agenda in terms of any partner's propensity to feed into the agenda, to contribute to a strategy. That invitation is always there. So it's not necessarily led by the Education Directorate. It's very much open to all partnerships to lead on. On the issue of identifying a business member, whatever industry or business they would represent, I think the cabinet member did respond to say that you know, we have links with the Regional Learning and Skills Partnership. They're represented on the board. Obviously, each of the partners has their own links with businesses, and that link really is fed in through the partnership. It is difficult to identify. If you've got any nominations, any names that we can consider approaching, I'd welcome hearing them really. But I think the partnership would need to change their terms of reference. The report that went to Cabinet originally did not reference the business community, although obviously there's a clear desire for that to happen. It wasn't actually part of the recommendations that went to Cabinet originally, and that membership doesn't include somebody from the business world currently. So open to suggestions, but I think for now the partnership recognises its own links with its own business partners, and that is sufficient for how the partnership functions.
If I could come in, Chair. I mean, I think obviously there's process indicators and there's outcomes indicators, and yes, we can measure the level of engagement with the Swansea Skills Partnership, our members and our partner organisations attending meetings, the level of are they being represented and so on. Those are fairly easy to measure, and as Helen said, a lot of these outcomes will be captured in the measurement of neat figures, for instance, and some of the outputs of the projects that are discussed by the Swansea Skills Partnership. But I think what's important to recognise as well, this isn't a static partnership. This is about providing a strategic overview of learning within Swansea and ensuring that we get synergy in the work of the different partner organisations, whether it's our schools, whether it's the local authority, whether it's the college, the universities and workplace learning providers, and all the other potential partners here. So I think it's something that's going to evolve as it moves forward. And that's likely to be the case with business engagement. I think as those city deal projects move on, then I would expect more and more discussion and more involvement with the business community, with employers, as the skills needs become more apparent, and as we try and gear provision within Swansea to meeting those skills needs.
Thanks for the reply. Sorry, I don't much to prolong it too long, but I'll put my thinking cap on about business representation. But I would really encourage you to talk to the partners. Just I've had a bit of feedback which would be indicative perhaps of them wanting to see the partnership develop further, and it would be useful to talk to the partners to find out ways in which they think that can happen. Great,
thank you. And in answer to Helen's one of her opening comments, yeah, I'm very proud of the way the partnership is working. One of the drivers, it was set up, or we prepared a report to Cabinet under Robert's chairmanship of the Education and Skills PDC. One of the drivers was that we didn't want to second guess what business wanted, and some schools were extremely good at contact with business, others not so good, and the whole idea was to bring that together, because what we wanted was, with the city deal, we wanted to make sure that local children, local pupils, had those real opportunities to engage in those business and get those jobs, and not to have to move out to Swansea to get meaningful and good employment. And that was one of the drivers. I think that I've said all along, we need a bigger involvement from business, and that is vital to put that extra element into it to make it even better. But certainly, a lot of work has been done, and a lot of groups who weren't talking in this way are now talking, and I think that will benefit the children in Swansea in the future. Are there any other comments by anybody? But thank you all for that. Right, the next thing is the update on the Regional Education Partnership.
Yes, Jan, I think what you've got presented there is the report that went to Cabinet. And I'd like to thank the officers, both in Helen's team and the legal team, who spent hours drafting this new legal agreement. My feeling is that this is going to meet our needs more effectively than the previous partnership. Things have moved on since the report. I think it's 2011 that led to the old consortia emerging as regional consortia. Our needs have changed, and I think the region's needs have changed. I think moving forward, this offers us a more compact region that we can work with, and it will enable us to work in a way that harnesses the expertise of our own staff internally and access other support where appropriate, and of course ensure that our the expertise that rests within Swansea is available as and when appropriate to our partner authorities as well. So Helen, do you want to make any comments on the practicalities?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So the legal agreement, it's obviously not completely finalised, but it's a very good draft, and it's been through several iterations. Obviously, the three directors and the three authorities and the chief execs and the leaders obviously have considered it, and each cabinet and the constituent councils of Partneriaeth have approved. I think the last one to do so was Carmarthenshire, and they did it on the 22nd of October. So what this legal agreement allows us to do is to have a joint committee proper. We've met as a shadow joint committee as we've transformed from Erwn to Partneriaeth. And we look forward in the new year really to have a proper joint committee for the first time that can make decisions. We'll also need to wind down Erw. We'll need to close down the accounts of Erw, and we'll need a final Erw joint committee meeting really for that to happen, no doubt. The Partneriaeth itself is in a position of flux in the sense that the existing staff structure of ERU obviously has gone through change. So we've been able to retain some of those staff. Other staff have gone to other jobs, and there may be positions that we still need to fill. So the Chief Officer for Partneriaeth hopefully will be appointed next week. And that will mark really a big change into how the Partneriaeth is driven forward. And obviously the size of the entities is much reduced. So where ERU had close to over 450 schools, we've got about 260. So we've scaled things down, but we are very much focused on delivering professional learning for our teachers in Partneriaeth and delivering leadership development. And then the work of the local authority in terms of monitoring our schools will sit with our Swansea employed school improvement advisors. So they are not transferring into Partneriaeth, they are still sitting with us. And as you know, we've got a governance structure. If you've read the legal agreement, I know it's 16 pages long, but within that legal agreement, before you today, you can see that there is a strong governance structure, which includes the scrutiny group that I know, Chair, you've been involved in. And that scrutiny group really is being perpetuated because it was working well in ERU in terms of holding people to account for planning and performance. So that'll continue. So we expect really the staff structure potentially to be finalised, if not by the end of this month, definitely in January. And then we'll be in a position really to enter a new financial year, I would say, where we've got a clear Partneriaeth and ERU has finally gone. But as you can imagine, this year has been a transitional year. We had hoped to do it by September. ERU kind of stopped operating in September, but we've still got the legal and accounting things to just finalise before ERU disappears for good.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Can I just ask one? Obviously, we have to wind down ERU, and obviously, when ERU was running in its full capacity, with Nice Talbot, Ceredigion, and Powys, are they going to meet part of any costs in running down the organisation? Because obviously, they were part of it and have only pulled out in recent times.
Yes, I can't divulge how many redundancies there'll be, but there will be redundancy costs attached to the management of change from one staffing structure to the other. So those redundancies will have to be shared amongst the partners. That's been taken care of.
And that will be all the partners, not just the partners in the new body, which would be the fair way of doing that. Great, thank you, and thanks for the full report. And if there are no other questions, we move straight on to the work programme. And has anybody got any comments about the work programme? Our next meeting is on the 20th of January. Anything at all? Nothing at all? If not, can I close the meeting? Can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas? It's almost that time of year. Very Merry Christmas, and hope you have a great time and keep safe and over the festive period. Thank you very much.
I'm wishing all our education colleagues a nice rest.